So far we have covered how we could apply basic materials, for example, change the color or change the transparency or the reflectivity of the surface. But there's more to it. We can, for example, add a texture onto your surface. So let's say my backdrop I would like to turn from a diffuse gray paper material into an arced wooden floor. So what I need to do is actually I would have to unfold this geometry into something that is flat. Maybe might sound a little bit complicated. Let's go to Google, and I have, for example, this image here. So what you see here is a very simple box template, and on the different sides, think about those as faces, you can place a specific graphic. In real life, you would take a sheet of cardboard, run it through a printer, and then you would cut out your template, then you would crease the edges and fold the box into the shape. Well, in Blender, we build the object, so afterwards we have to unfold it. So we can then glue the texture over it, because we have to tell Blender somehow how it should apply this texture onto our geometry. So I said I would like to have a wooden floor. Let's type in wooden floor texture, and let's use this one. You could click Save As to save it maybe on your desktop. Then I go to Blender, and actually I'm going into perspective 3D view here, and then this view I'm going to change into UV image editor. And then in the 3D view, you can press U and click Unwrap. So let me show you again what unwrapping is doing using this UV map. You see on the left side, nothing there is visible. If I press U and click Unwrap, you see now this mesh being folded down. So it's kind of like a 2D view of our product, like this, just unwrapped, flat. So now in Blender, we could go ahead and go to maybe image, open, I go to my desktop, here's this wooden floor, click open, and then you see now how this mesh is positioned over this texture. With B, I could select those points, and with W, straighten them up. So for example, everything that is inside this face, so this texture, is being glued onto this part. Everything in this face is being glued or rendered on this face. So it's basically like a mapping. That also means if I, for example, move this left and right, I change what will be visible on all those different faces. The same if I scale it down, then only what's inside this face or those faces will be visible here. So your scale and rotation and position of your mesh on the image in your UV editor is actually quite important, because this way you can easily or comfortably position your texture on an object. So let's go to render, but we don't really see anything. It's still this grayish background. Well, that is because our material is still just a diffuse. So what we have to do is I could either, for example, go to color, click on this button, and then say I would like instead of a color, an image texture. And then you see inside the node editor, this image texture got added, and the color from the image texture goes into the color of my material. And currently this is now magenta because we don't have any image yet added. So either here or here, you see the things are the same. I can click on image and, for example, select the wood floor. And the next thing I have to do is I go to vector and select UV. Or for example, here I could press Shift A, input texture coordinate, and then select UV and put it into the vector. UV is actually like this. So if I rotate this, you see this image is being rotated. So think about UV kind of like a X, Y, and Z, or X and Y chart, a 2D chart, and unwrapping establishes like a spatial relationship where this mesh is on this image, and then that is being used to display this image on this material. So this way, for example, we now have our material kind of like put over this backdrop. Now the wood grain actually looks quite large. I would like that to be smaller. Now there are two ways how we can do this. I can go in here and, for example, scale this up. And then you see it actually, it repeats. So I would say at the moment, preferably at least along the Y or the X axis 2 times. And if I zoom out a little bit, you can see that if I make this even bigger, the wood grain gets even more detailed. And then at one point you can start seeing the pattern to repeat each other. Like here you see those thicker lines. Those probably come more from this part. So if I do the opposite, let's say I make this really small, kind of like this, and then I put it, let's say, on here. You hardly can even really see anything because now this image is being stretched over there. So to undo it, I just click unwrap again and then quickly clean those up a little bit. If I would like more definition, for example, along my x-axis, I can, if I want to, move this over. That actually means this whole image is being squeezed onto this mesh. I could also down here, for example, go to vector, mapping, and put the mapping in here. And then there I have, for example, a scale. I could say along the x-axis, scale it 2 times, or scale it 20 times. Now you see, for example, the wood pattern looks more like fine, thin lines. And that's because along the x-axis, I'm scaling it or repeating it 20 times. So basically what I do here also with the rotation is the same as, for example, in here, scaling it and rotating it. It basically has the same functionality. So that's, for example, a very basic way how to put a texture onto a flat backdrop. And then to make that backdrop, for example, look good, I could maybe add a glossy shader add a mix factor. Then, yeah, I would like to have a small roughness, but actually maybe only a little bit of reflection. This material, so everything renders faster, I'm going to simplify into just a diffuse material. So let's play a little bit with this. Do I have my worlds? Yeah, okay. So, and then if I make that glossy more rough, then for example, the reflection on the ground plane is going to be more diffuse. Of course, if I have it on 0, it's crisper down here. So that's one way, for example, then how you can create the wooden floor with kind of like a polyurethane coating on top. Of course, this right now is very basic and I rushed through those a little bit. There's much more to talk about, but I will come back to those later.